This has been a fascinating discussion. I've got family physicians in the family get to sign death certificates at 3 a.m. They don't do it to go and catch a baby at 4 in the morning. They're generally really good people that have gone into this field. And yet time and time again, we see this disconnect between what we think is normal and decent and civilized, and yet they can't see our point of view in terms of, we had a great family doctor until Sydney was born, and then she told us to go take her home and love her like a puppy. She was, where do we, are the med schools screwing them up, or where does this real fundamental disconnect that we hear about so often, and yet most people in the medical community are good, decent, loving, kind, I mean, they're doing this job for a reason. Where does that disconnect, do we think, come from?
I don't think that we're normally dealing with people who know that they're doing the wrong thing. I do think we're dealing with people who aren't always honest with us. But I think that we're dealing with people who think that they're right and we're wrong, who see us as under some kind of dangerous delusion. C.B. Farrar, who was one of Canada's most famous psychiatrists back in the 1940s, wrote an article on killing babies with severe disabilities, why basically all of them should be killed, and his recommendation, he wanted to be really, really fair. And so his suggestion was that you have to wait till their 5th birthday to make sure that, I was planning a pizza party for my kid. It wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but his idea was you wait till their 5th birthday because then you're not going to make any mistakes and we can't have mistakes, et cetera. But what he writes, and I hope this article was published in 1942 or et cetera. And I hope that we won't see articles like this published today. But the part that I think is very relevant today, when he talks about this, well, you have to wait till they're 5 years old, and then he says, you know what the problem's going to be? These parents get really attached to their kids. and then that stands in the way of us doing the right thing. And he refers, he's a psychiatrist, and he refers to parents' attachment to kids with disabilities. And he refers to it in the technical sense, and he refers to it as a morbid obsession. And so in this article, what he's saying to every psychiatrist, to every physician, that your duty, the most important duty that you have in order to make this better world in which we just kill kids with disabilities, is to do everything in your power to ensure that parents don't get attached to their kids with disabilities. In that view, we're all sick, okay? We're the ones who are suffering from this morbid obsession, and they're the rational people who really understand what's good for the world. The other thing that I want to mention is, and it's an interesting phenomenon, and it's one that I can't completely explain, but I certainly see it, is that I see nurses confronting doctors when they get brave enough. I see doctors confronting each other. In our own experience, many years ago, we had a child who was very, very medically challenged, I guess and we had an incident where our primary pediatrician was going to be away for a couple days, and there was another pediatrician who always covered for her. This was a small town, and they were the 2 female pediatricians in the town, and they always covered for each other. And in the middle of the night, our daughter's condition was such that she couldn't mobilize glucose, and so she literally could starve to death in 3 hours. And what kept her alive was an IV with dextrose. And so in the middle of the night, the IV failed. And they called this other physician to come. And she came 6 hours later. And our child survived that particular incident, but she survived just barely. And when I confronted the physician at that time, her response was basically, your child's going to die anyway. And effectively she said, it's a cold, miserable night, and why should I come out of my bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to, you know, they couldn't restart the IV, they wanted somebody to do a cut down to get an IV started. Why should I do that when your baby's just going to die anyway and it's prolonging the inevitable? But the interesting part was that after that happened, when our primary pediatrician was back, she didn't actually ever say anything bad about this other colleague who she worked with. But she did come to me after that. She gave me a card for another pediatrician. And she said, this is Dr. Goldfarb. If I'm not here, call Dr. Goldfarb. He's a rotten son of a bitch, but he'll keep your baby alive. Those were her exact words. And so, what I'm trying to say is that these group of people know each other, and they know what their attitudes are. They usually find a way to work with each other, although if you read, for example, the story of the Indiana Doe case, where you have the two physicians facing off in the neonatal intensive care unit about to have a fist fight, it does sometimes come to clear confrontation like that. But that whole issue of, you have people with these different attitudes, but they won't, or they don't feel that they can. I mean, sometimes you'll have them sort of look at you like you don't really want to talk to that person or whatever. But their dedication to their profession is such that as much as they may care about your kid, they're not usually willing to confront those issues very publicly. And it's a shame.
But if they read Singer, most of them will say that's reprehensible, and yet they act as if that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's the disconnect I'm talking about.
I'm not sure if they all will say that that's reprehensible. I think a lot of them will, but I think a lot of them will support those arguments. And sometimes I think when they're putting on a face that seems a little bit more sympathetic, in some cases I think that's very real, but in some cases I think that's their idea of humoring us nutcases.